You know that feeling when you walk into a room and immediately sense you don't belong? That was me, standing in my brother Mike's perfectly decorated foyer, clutching a bottle of wine like a shield. The scent of cinnamon and pine hit me first, then the sound of laughter drifting from the living room where my family was already gathered. I'd spent an hour getting ready, choosing my best burgundy dress, the one that actually fit well and made me feel confident. But now, seeing Sarah's immaculate home with its gleaming hardwood floors and designer Christmas decorations, I felt that familiar shrinking sensation, like I was taking up too much space in a world built for smaller people. Sarah appeared in the hallway, her blonde hair perfectly curled, wearing a cream-colored sweater that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Her smile was practiced, the kind she'd perfected for her Instagram posts. "Oh, you made it. We were wondering." She let the sentence hang there, taking the wine from my hands without looking at the label. "Everyone's in the living room. Dinner should be ready soon." The dining room looked like something from a magazine spread. Crystal glasses caught the light from the chandelier, and each place setting was arranged with military precision. But it was the chairs that made my stomach drop. Antique wooden chairs with narrow arms and delicate frames. The kind that whispered museum piece rather than comfortable seating. I'd been to enough family gatherings to know this dance. Find the sturdiest looking chair, sit carefully, and pray nothing creaks. But these chairs were different. They were clearly Sarah's pride and joy, probably inherited from some great-grandmother and worth more than my car. During dinner, I managed to squeeze myself into the chair at the far end of the table. The arms pressed against my hips, but I could breathe, so I called it a victory. Conversation flowed around me like water around a stone. Sarah dominated the discussion, talking about her yoga classes, her book club, the charity gala she was organizing. My brother nodded along, playing the supportive husband role he'd perfected over their 5-year marriage. "And the photographer said our Christmas card photo was the most elegant he'd shot this season," Sarah continued, passing around her phone to show the professional family portrait. 3 generations of my family oohed and awed over the perfect composition, the perfect lighting, the perfect family that somehow didn't include me. I pushed my food around my plate, hyper-aware of every bite, every movement. The chair seemed to grow tighter as the meal progressed, but I was determined not to make a scene. I could handle this. I always handled this. But then came dessert, and the inevitable migration to the living room for gift exchange, the moment I'd been dreading without even realizing it. I placed my hands on the chair arms and pushed. Nothing. The wooden arms had me locked in place like a trap. I tried again, more discreetly, shifting my weight and pushing harder. The chair didn't budge, and worse, it creaked ominously. Panic started to build in my chest. I glanced around the table, but everyone was busy clearing dishes and chatting about presents. Maybe if I just stayed seated a little longer, waited for the perfect moment when no one was watching. But Sarah noticed everything. It was her superpower, this ability to spot discomfort and zoom in on it like a heat-seeking missile. "Aren't you coming to open gifts?" she called out from the living room doorway, her voice carrying that false sweetness that made my skin crawl. I tried once more, gripping the chair arms and pushing with everything I had. The wood groaned, and for a terrifying moment I thought it might snap. That's when Sarah's eyes widened, and I saw the exact moment she realized what was happening. The giggle started small, just a little intake of breath, but then it grew, bubbling up from her chest like champagne in a shaken bottle. Other family members started to notice, turning to see what was so amusing. "Oh, honey," Sarah said, her voice loud enough to carry to the living room. "Maybe we should have warned you about those antique chairs." The laughter that followed wasn't malicious, not from everyone. Some family members looked genuinely concerned, reaching out to help. But Sarah's amusement was unmistakable, and it infected the moment like a virus. My face burned with shame as I finally managed to work myself free with an ungraceful series of movements that made the chair scrape loudly against the hardwood floor. The silence that followed was deafening. My brother Mike looked mortified, caught between loyalty to his wife and protection of his sister. He opened his mouth as if to say something, then closed it again. That moment of hesitation told me everything I needed to know. I mumbled something about needing the bathroom and escaped down the hallway, my legs shaking with humiliation and rage. In the powder room, I gripped the marble countertop and stared at my reflection in the mirror. My carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the flush of shame across my cheeks, and my eyes were bright with unshed tears. But as I stood there, Something cold and hard crystallized in my chest. This wasn't just embarrassment anymore. This was a line crossed, a boundary violated in front of people I loved. And Sarah's laughter, that musical sound of pure delight at my discomfort, played on repeat in my mind. I splashed cold water on my wrists, took a deep breath, and made a decision that would change everything. When I walked back into that living room, I wasn't just going to pretend this didn't happen. I was going to remember every detail, every face, every sound. Because Sarah had just made a very serious mistake. She'd shown me exactly who she was, and now I was going to show her exactly who I could become. When I returned to that living room, something fundamental had shifted inside me. The tears were gone, replaced by something much more dangerous: clarity. I sat down on the couch with deliberate calm, my movements precise and controlled. No one seemed to notice the change, but I felt it in every fiber of my being. The gift exchange had already begun without me. Sarah was in her element, orchestrating the perfect Christmas moment like a director staging a play. She positioned herself at the center of everything, her phone always ready to capture the ideal angle, the perfect candid shot that was anything but candid. "Oh, wait, let me get a picture of everyone," she exclaimed, jumping up with practiced enthusiasm. The family dutifully arranged themselves around the Christmas tree, and I watched as Sarah's eyes swept over the group, calculating compositions like a photographer at a wedding. I remained on the couch, silent and still. When Sarah's gaze landed on me, there was a brief moment of uncertainty. Should she include the woman who'd just gotten stuck in her precious antique chair? I could see the wheels turning behind her bright smile. "Come on, join us," she called out, but her tone lacked conviction. It was an invitation born of social obligation rather than genuine desire. I shook my head slightly, offering the faintest of smiles. "I'm fine here," I said, my voice neutral and polite. It was probably the first complete sentence I'd spoken since the chair incident, and something in my tone made her pause. But Sarah recovered quickly, turning back to her human props with renewed energy. "Okay, everyone, say Merry Christmas." As the evening progressed, I became a student of Sarah's behavior. Every word, every gesture, every perfectly timed laugh was filed away in my memory like evidence in a case I was building. I noticed how she needed constant validation, how her eyes would dart to her phone after every joke to see if anyone was recording, how she'd repeat funny stories from earlier in the evening, fishing for the same reaction she'd gotten the first time. "More eggnog, anyone?" she asked, making her rounds with the crystal pitcher. When she reached me, her smile was just a fraction too bright, her voice just a note too high. "Well, maybe not everyone needs more." The comment hung in the air like smoke from a snuffed candle. A few family members shifted uncomfortably, but no one said anything. They never did. That's how bullies like Sarah operated. Through plausible deniability, through comments that could be explained away as jokes or concern or simple misunderstandings. I met her eyes directly for the first time that evening. My expression didn't change, but something passed between us in that moment. A recognition. She'd shown her hand, and now I was showing mine. Not through words or reactions, but through the absolute stillness of my response. The rest of the family seemed oblivious to this silent exchange. My brother Mike was helping his daughter open a complicated toy, completely absorbed in the task. My parents were admiring a photo album Sarah had made, praising her creativity and attention to detail. But I saw everything differently now. I watched Sarah post a boomerang video of herself laughing at something my nephew had said, then another of the Christmas tree with its perfect lighting, then a selfie with my brother, both of them looking blissfully happy. Each post was carefully curated, designed to project an image of effortless perfection, but I was beginning to see the cracks in that facade. The way she checked her phone obsessively, refreshing her notifications every few minutes. The slight panic that crossed her face when a story didn't get immediate likes. The way she'd repeat herself when she thought no one was paying enough attention. Sarah needed to be seen, to be admired, to be envied, too. It wasn't enough for her to have a beautiful home or a loving husband or a picture-perfect life. She needed witnesses to that perfection, needed constant confirmation that she was winning at the game of life. And therein lay her weakness. When it came time to leave, I thanked them for dinner with the same polite neutrality I'd maintained all evening. Sarah hugged me goodbye, and for just a moment, her grip was tighter than necessary, her voice lower. "I hope you had a good time," she whispered against my ear. Despite Well, you know. I pulled back and smiled at her, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. It was perfect, I said, and the word carried more weight than she could possibly understand. Over the next few days, Sarah's social media became my evening entertainment. Photo after photo from Christmas dinner appeared on her Instagram, each one more carefully staged than the last. The dining room looked like something from Better Homes and Gardens. The family appeared warm and loving and impossibly photogenic, and I was nowhere to be seen. It wasn't surprising, really. I'd become an expert at recognizing when I'd been edited out of family memories, sometimes literally cropped from photos, sometimes simply not included in the shots that made it to social media. It used to hurt, that systematic erasure of my presence from our family's documented history. Now it just gave me more information to work with. Sarah's Instagram stories were particularly revealing. Behind-the-scenes glimpses of her perfect life, complete with humble bragging captions about how blessed she was and how grateful she felt. The comments section was a symphony of praise from friends and acquaintances, all competing to heap the most superlatives on her performance. But I noticed other things too. The way certain friends had stopped commenting as frequently. The subtle signs that some people were growing tired of the constant performance. Social media was a theater, and like all theater, it required a willing audience. And audiences, I was beginning to realize, could be fickle. My phone buzzed with the family group chat, messages flying back and forth about what a wonderful evening it had been, how beautiful Sarah's decorations were, how delicious the food was. I read every message but didn't respond. My silence in the digital space was as deliberate as it had been in person. My brother Mike sent me a private text. "You okay? You seemed quiet tonight." I stared at the message for a long time before responding with a simple, "I'm fine." But I wasn't fine. I was something much more dangerous than fine. I was focused. For the first time in years, maybe decades, I had a purpose that burned brighter than my shame. Sarah had given me a gift without realizing it. She'd shown me that silence could be a weapon, that observation could be power, and that patience was the sharpest blade of all. As I lay in bed that night, I wasn't replaying the humiliation of the chair incident. Instead, I was planning, because Sarah had made one crucial mistake in her moment of triumph. She'd underestimated me, and that was going to cost her everything. 3 days after Christmas, Sarah's message popped up in the family group chat like a perfectly timed gift. "New Year's Eve party at our house. It's going to be absolutely magical. Everyone dressed to impress. I want this to be Instagram-worthy." I stared at my phone screen, reading the message 3 times before the corners of my mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. The other family members were already responding with enthusiasm, heart emojis, and promises to bring champagne. But I waited. Patience had become my new religion, and timing was everything. When I finally replied, it was with 2 simple words: "I'll be there." The response was immediate. Sarah sent a private message within minutes. "So excited you can make it. It'll be such a fun way to start fresh in the new year." Start fresh. The irony wasn't lost on me. The next week passed in careful preparation. I booked an appointment at the most expensive salon in town, splurging on highlights, and a cut that framed my face perfectly. I found a dress that made me feel dangerous, midnight blue with silver threading that caught the light when I moved. It fit me like armor disguised as silk. But the real preparation was mental. I studied Sarah's social media patterns like a scientist analyzing data. She posted every 2 hours during peak engagement times. Her stories were always perfectly curated glimpses behind the scenes. She responded to comments within minutes, craving that constant dopamine hit of online validation. Most importantly, I noticed how she documented every social gathering with religious devotion. Her parties weren't just events. They were content opportunities, carefully orchestrated performances designed to make everyone else's life look boring by comparison. The night of the party, I arrived fashionably late. Sarah answered the door in a champagne-colored dress that probably cost more than most people's rent, her makeup flawless under the warm lighting she'd undoubtedly spent hours perfecting. "Oh my God, you look amazing," she gushed, but there was something brittle in her enthusiasm. She'd been expecting the same woman who'd gotten stuck in her dining room chair. Instead, she was faced with someone who looked like they belonged on the cover of a magazine. The house was transformed into a winter wonderland, all silver and gold and twinkling lights. Guests mingled in the living room, champagne glasses catching the reflection of dozens of candles. It was beautiful, I had to admit. Sarah knew how to create an atmosphere. Before I tell you what happened next, if this story is giving you chills of satisfaction, like you know exactly what's coming, smash that subscribe button right now, because what happens next is going to blow your mind. Drop a comment and tell me what you would have done in my situation. Hit that like button if you're team strategic revenge, and share this with someone who's dealt with a sister-in-law from hell. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this ends. I moved through the party like a different person entirely. Charming, engaging, asking everyone about their holidays and actually listening to their answers. People who'd barely noticed me at family gatherings suddenly found themselves drawn into conversations with me. I wasn't hiding in corners anymore. I was commanding attention. And Sarah noticed. Oh, how she noticed. "You're absolutely glowing tonight," she said, appearing at my elbow with her phone already in hand. "We need to get some photos together." This was the moment I'd been waiting for. "Actually," I said, gently taking her phone from her hands, "let me get some shots of you. You look incredible, and I know all the best angles." Her face lit up like a Christmas tree. This was Sarah's weakness, the promise of being the center of attention, of being photographed and admired and validated. She positioned herself by the fireplace, trying different poses while I captured shot after shot. But I wasn't just taking photos. I was documenting everything. The champagne glass that never left her hand, the way her laughter got louder and more forced as the evening progressed, how she started interrupting conversations to redirect attention back to herself, the subtle cruelty that crept into her comments as the alcohol loosened her tongue. "Make sure you get my good side," she laughed, tilting her head at an angle she'd clearly practiced in mirrors. "Not everyone photographs well, but I've always been lucky that way." I smiled and kept taking pictures. Each click of the camera shutter another piece of evidence in the case I was building. Around us, the party continued in full swing. My brother was telling stories to a group by the window, clearly having enjoyed the open bar. Other guests were dancing, laughing, celebrating the promise of a new year. But I was working. Every photo I took, every video I captured, every moment I witnessed was being carefully cataloged for future use. Sarah had no idea she was starring in her own documentary, that every unguarded moment was being preserved in high definition. As midnight approached, I could see the alcohol taking its toll on our hostess. Her perfect facade was beginning to slip, and the woman underneath wasn't nearly as charming as the Instagram version. She was getting sloppy, loud, inappropriate with other women's husbands. The kind of behavior that would be mortifying in the cold light of day, and I captured every single second of it. The countdown began, and as everyone shouted "Happy New Year" and kissed their partners, I stood back and watched Sarah stumble slightly in her designer heels, her champagne sloshing dangerously close to her white carpet. She was so focused on getting the perfect midnight selfie that she didn't notice the chaos accumulating around her. The mess was spectacular. Spilled drinks, scattered napkins, lipstick stains on her pristine glassware. Her beautiful party was ending in exactly the kind of disaster she spent her life trying to avoid. But the real disaster was yet to come. Because in a few hours, when Sarah was sleeping off her champagne hangover, I would begin the careful work of destroying everything she'd spent years building, and she would never see it coming. 2 hours after midnight, Sarah's house looked like a war zone. She was passed out on her white leather couch, one designer heel dangling from her foot, her perfect makeup smeared across the throw pillow. The woman who'd built her entire identity around effortless elegance was snoring softly, surrounded by the wreckage of her own party. I stayed to help clean up, moving silently through the devastation while my brother and the remaining guests worked around Sarah's unconscious form. But I wasn't really cleaning. I was curating, selecting the most damaging photos from the hundreds I'd taken throughout the night. The contrast was breathtaking. Sarah's carefully posed Instagram shots from earlier in the evening showed a goddess in champagne silk, radiant and sophisticated. The reality I'd captured told a very different story. Here she was, flirting shamelessly with married men. There she was making cutting remarks about other women's appearances. And in this final series of shots, she was stumbling through her own house, completely obliterated. But the crown jewel was a video I hadn't even planned to take. Around 11:30, emboldened by alcohol and her captive audience, Sarah had decided to reenact the Christmas chair incident for the entertainment of her book club friends. "You should have seen her trying to get out of that antique chair," she laughed, mimicking my struggle with cruel precision. "I thought she was going to break the poor thing in half. I mean, honestly, know your limitations, right? Her friends had laughed along. These perfectly polished women who lunch at country clubs and volunteer at charity galas. They'd found my humiliation hilarious, a delicious piece of gossip to dissect over their next wine tasting. I'd recorded every word. At 3 a.m, I finally left Sarah's house, carrying my evidence like a treasure chest. My brother mumbled goodbye from the doorway, too exhausted and drunk to notice the predatory satisfaction in my smile. The next 48 hours required surgical precision. I didn't post anything on social media. I didn't send mass emails or create dramatic public scenes. Instead, I made a series of very targeted, very private communications. First, I created a photo album titled Behind the Scenes, New Year's Reality. It was a masterpiece of storytelling without words. Sarah's posed perfection side by side with her sloppy reality, her Instagram captions about gratitude and class juxtaposed with images of her disparaging other women. Her carefully crafted image as the perfect hostess contrasted with the chaos of her actual hosting skills. Then I began making calls. "Hi, Margaret, it's Sarah's sister-in-law. I have something I thought you might want to see before the book club meeting next week." Margaret was the president of Sarah's book club, a woman who prided herself on maintaining certain standards of behavior among their social circle. "Hello, Jennifer. I was going through photos from New Year's and came across something rather concerning." Jennifer was the charity gala coordinator, someone who'd been considering Sarah for a prominent committee position. "Good morning, Mrs. Patterson. I hope I'm not disturbing you." Mrs. Patterson was Sarah's neighbor, a woman whose opinion carried significant weight in their exclusive subdivision. Each conversation was brief, professional, concerned. I never said anything malicious about Sarah directly. I simply shared what I'd witnessed and let them draw their own conclusions. The video of her mocking my humiliation, I sent anonymously to 3 different people, letting them decide what to do with it. By Monday morning, Sarah's carefully constructed social world was beginning to crumble. Margaret called to inform her that the book club was taking a different direction and wouldn't be meeting at her house anymore. Jennifer mentioned that the charity committee had chosen someone else for the coordinator position. Mrs. Patterson stopped returning her texts about their weekly tennis games. Sarah's Instagram posts became increasingly desperate, more frequent, more obviously staged, with captions that reeked of insecurity disguised as confidence. "Living my best life" appeared 17 times in 1 week. She was posting selfies at increasingly odd hours, fishing for validation that came in smaller and smaller doses. The most beautiful part was watching her try to figure out what had gone wrong. She suspected, of course. The way she looked at me during the next family gathering was almost comical in its paranoia, but she could never be sure. After all, I'd never said a word against her. I'd simply documented her own behavior and shared it with people who cared about character and reputation. 3 weeks later, at my nephew's birthday party, Sarah sat quietly in the corner, subdued and uncertain. Gone was the commanding presence that had dominated every previous gathering. She made no jokes about anyone's appearance. She took no photos for Instagram. She said please and thank you, like she was trying to remember how to be polite. I found myself sitting in the same dining room where this all began, in the same antique chair that had trapped me at Christmas. But this time, I rose from it easily, gracefully, like a queen from her throne. Sarah watched me stand, and in her eyes, I saw the recognition of a predator who'd finally met her match. She'd shown me who she really was, and I'd simply returned the favor. The justice was perfect, silent, and permanent. I'd won without firing a single shot, without uttering a single cruel word. I'd simply held up a mirror and let the world see what had always been there. Some people call it revenge. I call it truth. And sometimes the truth is the coldest weapon of all.